Good morning and welcome to this online service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunnyhill. Our mission is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. My name is Bradley Convis, and I'm proud to serve as a worship associate for this congregation. If you're a newcomer or visitor to Sunnyhill, please let us know you're here by posting a comment on the Facebook or YouTube feed. Or you can go to sunnyhill.org and click on the button that says New to Sunnyhill. We'd love to let you know how you can connect with our congregation even during this time when our building is closed. Our opening words were written by Erica Hewitt. We come from many different experiences and backgrounds. Some of us have trouble speaking. Others are so young that they're still learning to talk. Some of us speak English as a second language, and others of us can speak several foreign languages. All of us share this in common. We speak the language of love. We form a web of compassionate listening when individuals among us, embodying vulnerability, name the fears that grip their hearts and joys that buoy their spirits. We speak the language of love. At times, our voices clash. We disagree. Tension enters our voices as we make room for different beliefs, different opinions, different perspectives. Through it all, it's our intention that we speak the language of love. In this congregation, we welcome multiple truths, invite them to be named out loud. We speak truth to power, calling forth a time when justice and peace will be evident all around us. And we speak the language of love. Let us worship together, making room for one another as whole beings, tender hearts, hungry spirits, and curious minds. With our actions and with our words, let us speak the language of love. Once again, welcome to this online service.
Please join us in saying the words for lighting our chalice. If ever there were a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love. Ignite the light of peace and feed the flame of justice.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our first ever virtual membership ceremony. My name is Bethany Thornton, and I am the Membership and Outreach Manager here at Sunnyhill. Sunnyhillers, I miss you all so much, and I'm so happy to be with you here today and to introduce this wonderful group of people who are ready to become members of our congregation. Okay, first we have Adam Smith. Adam lives in Dormont, where he's worked as a software engineer for the past 10 years. He also enjoys cooking, gardening, and electronics. Adam discovered Sunnyhill this spring by way of the online Sunday services. He is so grateful to have found a community that shares so many of his thoughts and values and looks forward to being a part of it. Next, we have Michaeline Stabill and Wendy Bell. Michaeline and Wendy are two retired senior women who live in the South Fayette area. They are a same-sex married couple who have been together for 45 years. Michaeline is a retired city school administrator and university instructor in the field of special education. Wendy Bell, not the newscaster, although that's caused quite a few laughs among us, is a retired public manager who worked for city and county government and at the University of Pittsburgh as an administrator in the School of Medicine. Sunnyhill Unitarian Universalist Church seems a perfect fit for their own values and beliefs. They look forward to exploring their spiritual nature and to the opportunities to join with others in community on behalf of social justice activism. Next, we have Pat Lynn. Pat is a resident of Upper St. Clair, where she and her husband of 51 years, Jim, have raised a daughter and a son. Their 2 grandchildren live in Mount Lebanon with their son, and pre-COVID, they loved spending lots of time with them. Retired now, Pat has worked as a French teacher, a public assistance caseworker, and trained and supported users of a medical software product. Many of her volunteer activities after retiring were devoted to family hospice. During Pat's visits to Sunnyhill, she was impressed with the quality of the programming, sermons, music, congregational care, and the emphasis on social justice issues facing both the local and the wider community. Pat is looking forward to meeting more of you in this welcoming community and to sharing work, fun, and intellectually challenging ideas. Next, we have Tiana and Sam Apoku and their family. The Apoku family has spent the last 5 years in a quiet corner of Scott Township. Sam grew up in Pittsburgh, Tiana in upstate New York, only to meet in the DC area, have 2 boys, Isaac, who's 12, and Jasper, who's 9, and return to the city of Rivers. Sam is a lifelong learner of all things. Tiana is an artist and maker. Isaac loves animals and reading, while Jasper feels at home in the outdoors. At any given time, you can find the family playing games together. Magic the Gathering is a frequent favorite. They look forward to the friendships and learning they will have with everyone open to it in the UU community. Sam and Tiana say thank you to everyone at Sunnyhill for being you and for having us. Next, we have Clara Danner. Clara moved here in the spring of 2019 from Tucson to be closer to family. She is a retired nurse who is now writing a memoir about moments along her spiritual journey, working with refugees in Ghana, volunteering after natural disasters, grief, loss, and the wonders of being a mother and grandmother. Clara is looking forward to becoming involved at Sunnyhill. And next we have Jeannie Zhang. Jeannie was a longtime member of Allegheny UU Church before moving to Chapel Hill, North Carolina in 2013 to be near her son, daughter-in-law, and grandsons. While there, she was very involved with the Community Church of Chapel Hill, which happened to be Reverend Jim's old church. When she moved back to Pittsburgh last year, she was looking for a larger church, and since Reverend Jim came highly recommended by all her friends in Chapel Hill, she decided to come to Sunnyhill. Due to a broken leg in the fall, Jeannie only got to 1 service in March before the shutdown, but she attends all the virtual church services, sings in the virtual choir, and participates in a sharing circle. Jeannie definitely thinks Sunnyhill is the place for her. Jeannie is semi-retired as a self-employed translator. Her main interests are playing the hammered dulcimer, kayaking, and having fun with her grandsons, aged 8 and 3. Next is Allison Calderon. Allison is a certified public accountant who lives in Baldwin Township with her husband, Frank, and their 2 dogs, Mulan and Cam. Allison is active in her sorority's local alumni association and enjoys dancing, reading tarot cards, trying to keep an assortment of houseplants and herbs alive, and driving her and her husband's classic Oldsmobiles. Next is Louise Bauer. A little over a year ago, while out on a walk, Louise was drawn to the open door of Sunnyhill. Upon entering, she was warmly greeted by Margaret, and within minutes, she was writing postcards to our congressman. Margaret then showed her around and invited her to come to the following Sunday's service. Since then, Louise has rarely missed a service. At 74, she feels that she has been looking for Sunnyhill all of her adult life. It has truly been an oasis and refuge. Louise is so deeply grateful to Reverend McGaw, Bethany, Dean, and Randy, and of course Margaret, as well as the entire congregation. Thank you for affording her this gift and honor. And last, we have John Luff. John retired in 2018 after a 53-year career in television. He and Betty, his wife of 42 years, love to travel in their motorhome to warmer spots in the cold of winter. Their grown daughters live in Cranberry, Stephanie and her husband Frank, and Dublin, Ohio, Katie and her husband Keith, and their sons Jamie and Henry. John is an avid cyclist and enjoys reading, photography, and astronomy as hobbies. John was a member of Sunnyhill for over 25 years and looks forward to being part of the church community again. And that's everybody.
That's everyone. So I have some words which I'm going to read, and the first part is addressed to our new members, and I will ask you to respond at the appropriate moment saying we will. And to members of the congregation, I have a few questions that I will put to you after that, and I will ask you to respond from wherever you are, we will. Today we welcome into our congregation these new members who have chosen to become part of this church. We are so glad to have you here with us and delighted that you have chosen to share this part of your journey with us. Will you accept our gifts of fellowship, mutual support, and service? Will you offer us your unique presence and gifts? And will you work with us as we seek to create a community and a world dedicated to compassion and justice? If so, please say, we will.
We will.
We will.
Congregation, will you welcome these new members with the warmth and comfort of your fellowship? Will you seek to add your strengths and talents to the new gifts they bring to us? And will you share our triumphs and our struggles as our community grows and changes? If so, please say, we will. We will. Let us now say together these words which reflect our common purpose and common love in the midst of our diversity of beliefs. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. Again, please join me in welcoming these new members to our congregation.
Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do?
Hello, Sunnyhill. My name is Derek Luke. I became a member of Sunnyhill in December of 2019, and I am chair of our church's stewardship committee. For those who don't know, this committee is responsible for organizing the church's fundraising efforts, ensuring that the church has enough funding to meet the needs outlined in its budget. We help keep the lights on. Before I go further into that, I think it's appropriate to introduce myself some more and share a little about my journey and what brought me to this position at Sunnyhill. I grew up attending a Presbyterian church in Armstrong County. It's a fairly rural and conservative area about 45 minutes north of Pittsburgh. If you pressed me on how Presbyterianism differs from other forms of Protestant Christianity, I couldn't say much unless I did a little research. To me, I find it focusing on and crystallizing the differences between interpretations, denominations, and even other religions often misses the point of having a religion in the first place. But we can save this for another time. I was about 12 years old when my family and I stopped attending that church. You see, at the time, there were plans to build a new church, and every Sunday the pastor had a portion of time set aside to remind people that they needed to give more money so that the new church could be built sooner. Every Sunday. It was essentially a little guilt trip for not tithing enough in the eyes of the pastor. I don't know much about the specific financial situation of that church because I was 12, but I do know that where I grew up was and is a very working class, blue-collar area, and most families did not have a lot of money to give generally, let alone the increasing amounts and percentages of income the church was requesting every Sunday. After one of the sermons, my parents and some of the others stayed after church to talk with the pastor about decreasing both the frequency and duration of asking for more money. The pastor's reply to their concerns: but we need more money for the new church. I think that there was a large disconnect between what people could afford to give and the church's goals and timelines. It was an issue of poor leadership and a lack of transparency. Since I started attending Sunnyhill in May of 2019, I have witnessed excellent leadership and complete transparency with regard to the church's finances. And those are some of the main reasons I wanted to get more involved. I wanted to be part of an organization that I respected and that I wanted to help grow. So, without further ado, here is a high-level snapshot of the 2021 budget, with more information to come over the following weeks. Sunnyhill is keeping about the same budget total we had in 2020. There will be some changes in allocations among budget items, but otherwise no material changes. Pledges. The amount that individual members promise to contribute make up almost all of our church's income. Much of the rest is from non-pledge donations made during each Sunday's offering from standalone fundraising events. Our pledge goal for 2021 will be $435,000, just $5,000 more than last year. Payroll and benefits for our ministry and staff comprise the largest line item in our budget at around $315,000. Debt obligations, which are the loans and mortgage payments. Those are around $96,000 annually. Utilities and waste collection total about $1,300 per month. We have, as of today, 328 members at Sunnyhill in approximately 250 households. Last year, the average pledge per household was about $2,000, and we need to hold steady at that amount or increase it slightly this coming year. We do not have any set expectations for members based on dollar amounts or percentages. Just contribute whatever you are able to give. To make a pledge, go to sunnyhill.org and click on the 2021 Pledge button. Then you'll be asked a series of questions regarding the amount of your pledge, if you want to give on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, and a payment method. The whole process takes less than 5 minutes. For all those who turn their pledges today or tomorrow, we have a special thank you gift. Anyone who pledges today or tomorrow can stop by the church next Sunday to pick up a loaf of Sunnyhill's famous home-baked lemon bread. Get your pledge turned in today or tomorrow, and you'll receive more instructions about how and when to pick up your lemon bread. Thank you for listening, and now back to your regular program.
You have probably heard of Greta Thunberg and Malala Yousafzai, but do you know about Jennifer Keelan? Well, here's a little story so you can know a little bit about her as well. I want to take you back to a moment, to 30 years in the past, to the spring of 1990. Jennifer, as well as a number of other activists, is headed to Washington, D.C. for a protest. Now, Jennifer's no stranger to a protest. She's averaged one protest every 6 months for the last 2 years. She's even been arrested. But if you had seen Jennifer then, it would have been easy to dismiss her. For one, Jennifer was female. 2, she was only 8 years old. And 3, Jennifer used a wheelchair. However, this is the exact reason why she was in Washington, D.C. all those years ago. You see, the world before 1990 made very few accommodations for people with disabilities. Buildings didn't have ramps, sidewalks didn't have curb cuts, and people with disabilities could be refused service just because they were disabled. So on March 12, 1990, Jennifer and 475 other disabled activists went to Washington, D.C. to crawl up the 76 marble steps to the Capitol's West Front. They were begging the government. They wanted the government to pass the Americans with Disabilities Act, which had been stalled in Congress because big business thought it would cost them too much. The climb took Jennifer almost an hour to complete, but she is quoted as saying, "I'll take all night if I have to." The next day, this picture of Jennifer appeared in the news. The protest worked. On July 26, 1990, then President George H.W. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act into law with these words, "Let the shameful wall of exclusion finally come tumbling down." I share this story with you because I want you to know how powerful you are. Your activism matters. Today, people with disabilities have more access than they've had in the past, but there's still battles to be won. People with disabilities aren't getting the help they need because funding for essential services is being cut. During this time of COVID-19, hospitals can refuse life-saving treatment to patients because they're disabled. Did you know that 20% of the population lives with a disability? Imagine 1 out of every 5 of us not getting the health care we need because of a disability. So, what can you do about it? First off, you can wear a mask if you don't have a disability that would prevent you from wearing one safely. You can stay home, and when you must go out, you can physically distance yourself from any of those that do not live with you. You could also learn more about national disability rights issues.
The song that Jana is about to sing, the ADA Anthem, was written by musician and disability rights activist Jeff Moyer, who performed the song at the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which, as Jen just mentioned, took place in July of 1990. Earlier this year, Jeff updated some of the lyrics in honor of the 30th anniversary of the ADA.
Disability rights movement were the streams of constant change, for the worse and for the better, in flux it had remained. But to move it with decision towards human dignity, we gathered as one, there was work to be done, for we held only part of the key. ADA, we stand as one to see it through. ADA, civil rights overdue, but to shape new legislation based process and in place, bringing power to the people whose lives these things embraced. So we formed a coalition, and the system surely moved. It's a law today, it's the ADA, and the balance has improved. ADA, we stand as one to see it through. ADA, civil rights overdue. For those who are disabled, a change has been perceived, a freer step across this land on the road to liberty. So we sang this song together 30 years ago this year. It's still a journey we share, as together we care. The ADA's goal sweet and clear. ADA, we stand as one to see it through. ADA, civil rights overdue. ADA, we stand as one to see it through. ADA, civil rights very long overdue.
Each week at this time in the service, we share joys and sorrows submitted by members of the congregation. We share the things that we are celebrating as well as the things that we are mourning, so they need not be held alone. Joys and sorrows may be submitted online from our website or from the link in our newsletter, The Beat. After each joy or sorrow that I read, please respond by saying, "We hold you in our hearts." A joy from Jess Lott. Jess says, "I just wanted to say thank you so much to my Sunnyhill family. Everyone has been so kind, from dropping off delicious meals and treats to sending cards and good wishes. I am recovering from surgery nicely. I'm even back behind the wheel. I just started chemo, and although I'm nervous, I am ready to get this going. Thank you all again." To Jess, we hold you in our hearts. A joy from Carrie Lee and John Hemington. They say, "We are happy that John is home from a hospital stay for ventricular tachycardia, a potentially deadly heart condition. In his case, it was determined that he had had too many hotshot power drinks in a row on the golf course. No damage was done. We are grateful for many caring friends, emergency medical personnel, and St. Clair Hospital doctors and staff. To John and Carrie Lee, we hold you in our hearts." A joy from Amy Gloy, submitted in the previous week. Amy says, "I'm back home now after my recent surgery and am happy to share that I am now cancer-free. Now I begin the process of learning to speak clearly with my new voice prosthetic. To Amy and her family, we hold you in our hearts." A joy from Liz Bergman. Liz says, "The beautiful and sincere cards I received from the caring team brighten my days here. Your thoughtful messages were really appreciated. We are all hoping that COVID will go away before we go crazy." To Liz, we hold you in our hearts. Let us keep in mind all of these joys and sorrows, as well as those that are held too closely to be shared at this time. Please join me in the spirit of meditation or prayer. How very little time we spend simply listening, not listening to be entertained, not listening to find fault or to argue, not listening to gain advantage, not listening even to acquire knowledge, but listening simply and intently to what might be heard beneath the roar of those other thoughts and pursuits. What might be heard when our attention is focused only on the sounds themselves rather than on our interpretations of them. What might be heard when we are still enough to hear our own internal rumblings, not critically, but with a mind that says, open, and open again and again. Let us listen together in silence to the sounds beneath the rumble and the roar. May the stillness of this moment open us now to that which often goes unnoticed. May the quiet of this moment return to us when we need silence amidst the noise. And may the togetherness of this moment remind us that we are not alone. Amen.
Find a stillness, hold a stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
The topic for my sermon today, disability rights, was chosen by Mike Gravitt, who was the high bidder on a sermon on a topic of his choice at our Sunnyhill service auction last spring. I'm grateful to Mike and Jonna for putting forth this topic, which has not gotten as much attention as it deserves in our congregation and in the larger community. Today's sermon is an overview of the topic of disability rights, but I hope to delve more deeply into related subjects during future services. A good bit of the source material for this sermon came from a New York Times article titled "Nothing About Us Without Us" by Julia Carmel, and from a UUA document titled "Creating Welcoming Congregations for People of All Abilities," as well as sources that were provided by Mike and Jonna. With everything that's going on in our world right now, an unprecedented global pandemic and related economic chaos, ongoing violence against people of color, worldwide climate change-related natural disasters, and a divisive U.S. presidential election that may well result in more disorder and polarization. With all of these things going on, it may seem like an odd time to be talking about disability rights. But please keep in mind that all of these issues have a deep impact on the disability community. It's harder for people with disabilities to stay safe and stay employed during the pandemic and in the midst of natural disasters. People of color with disabilities are at even greater risk of being victims of violence than others are. And people with disabilities face huge challenges in exercising their right to vote. So in many ways, it is exactly the right time to be talking about disability rights issues. As most of you know, our first Unitarian Universalist principle affirms and promotes the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We often cite this principle in our work for social justice with LGBTQIA people, with people of color, with immigrants, and with members of ethnic and religious minorities. But the concept of inherent worth and dignity is crucially and especially important in the disability rights movement, which, as I said, is too often overlooked. Throughout history, people with disabilities have faced severe challenges to their humanity and were regarded as inferior or even worse. While early Christians, according to accounts in the scriptures, tended to regard people with disabilities with sympathy, during the Dark Ages, disabilities became regarded as a sign of sinfulness. Disabilities detected at birth were thought to be punishment for the sins of the parents. People with mental health disabilities were often thought of as being possessed by demons and were routinely chained, beaten, and even put to death. During the Enlightenment in the 1700s, the Western understanding of disabilities changed from a sin-based religious model to a medical model. People with disabilities were, for the first time, given some access to education, but they were largely seen as objects of pity and were treated with a perhaps well-intentioned but ultimately dismissive form of benevolent paternalism. In the United States in the 1800s, the idea of rugged individualism emerged as our nation's primary social ethos, and people with disabilities became segregated from the rest of the society and were often sent to live in various institutions. By the 1880s, most states and territories had institutions for people with specific types of disabilities. Most of these programs were large facilities where people were placed involuntarily for conditions such as blindness, deafness, developmental disabilities, and mental illnesses. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the eugenics movement became influential in the US and Europe. Disabilities were no longer viewed as spiritual defects, but rather as genetic defects. People influenced by eugenics tended to view people with disabilities as undesirables who weakened the human race. Atrocities in Nazi Germany and elsewhere were extreme examples of this kind of thinking. But such views were prominent in the US as well. In 1927, the infamous Buck versus Bell Supreme Court decision ruled that forced sterilization of people with disabilities was not a violation of their constitutional rights. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes equated sterilization to vaccination. And by the 1970s, over 60,000 disabled people were sterilized without their consent. In the aftermath of World War I and World War II, rehabilitation became the societal focus for people with disabilities, much of it directed toward disabled veterans. In the 1940s, among the blind community, the argument was made that the focus should shift from rehabilitation to education. Advocates argue that rehabilitation is based upon a medical model in which the person who is blind needs to be treated and cured rather than educated to live with blindness. And gradually this shift in emphasis from rehabilitation to education took place in the larger disability community. In the 1960s, for the first time in US history, people with disabilities, advocates, and service professionals began an intensive examination of the human service delivery system to decide what was missing. Community-based programs for people with disabilities began growing all over the nation in an attempt to fill the gaps left by these missing services. New concepts, new technologies, and new attitudes were beginning to make a difference in the lives of people with disabilities. In the midst of other social change movements of that era, including the Black freedom movement and the women's liberation movement, the disability rights movement began to emerge as a distinct strain of social advocacy and action. As a result of the work done through the disability rights movement, significant legislation addressing the rights of people with disabilities was passed in the 1970s through the 2000s in the United States. Disability rights advocates and individuals with different kinds of disabilities came together despite different backgrounds and different essential needs to fight for a common cause. The main goals of the disability rights movement have been, and still are, first, equal opportunities in the physical environment, accessibility, inclusion in transportation, architectural modifications, and the ability to use communication systems such as televisions, books, telephones, and the internet. Second, equal opportunities in living and the social sphere, independence, deinstitutionalization, fair employment, educational adaptations, and housing rights. And third, freedom from abuse, neglect, and violations of fundamental liberties. As mentioned earlier, this year, 2020, marks the 30th anniversary of the passage of the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, by the US Congress. As reported in the New York Times, in the months before the ADA was signed into law by President George H.W. Bush on July 26, 1990, it was stalled in Congress. All the I's have been dotted and all the T's have been crossed Representative Major R. Owens, a primary backer of the ADA, said of the law at that time, "There have been enough negotiations. Delay is the real enemy." On March 12, 1990, hundreds of demonstrators on the National Mall abandoned their wheelchairs and crutches and began crawling up the marble steps to the West Capitol entrance. The Capitol Crawl, as the event came to be known, underscored the injustices of inaccessibility that the ADA's Reasonable Accommodations Clause was intended to fix. Many of the protesters were arrested, including Anita Cameron, who said she had been arrested 139 times in her fight for disability rights. Lex Frieden, a disability policy expert who helped shape the ADA, said, "I think on that day of the Capitol Crawl, and at that time, more people learned about disability, discrimination, and equal opportunity than we can imagine." Justin Dart Jr. played a critical role in the passage of disability rights legislation. Known as the father of the ADA, he was a leader in the disability rights movement for 3 decades and an advocate for the rights of women, people of color, and LGBTQ people. Dart, the recipient of 5 presidential appointments and numerous honors, including the Hubert Humphrey Award of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights and the Presidential Medal of Freedom, was on the podium on the White House lawn when President Bush signed the ADA into law in July 1990. While the disability rights movement has made great progress in recent decades, it is still often overlooked among the other issues of the day. Again, as reported in the New York Times, about 30 to 50% of all people killed by law enforcement officers are disabled, according to a study by the Ruderman Family Foundation. As tensions heightened in 2014 alongside the rise of Black Lives Matter, this statistic became especially apparent. Disability was overlooked in news reports of the deaths of Sandra Bland, Eric Garner, Freddie Gray, and many others, said Cyree Jarrell Johnson, a Black disabled poet and librarian. Instead, she says, the term underlying conditions was used to refer to depression, asthma, and other medical issues, a euphemism that is bent to make people feel like they're not murdering disabled people. Confrontations with the police present a real concern for people like Valissa Thompson, a social worker and the founder of the blog Ramp Your Voice. She says, "I'm someone who's hard of hearing, and if I cannot hear a command that's given to me by law enforcement, that can make me appear to be non-compliant," she said. Clearly, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done with regard to disability awareness and disability rights advocacy. While perceptions of people with disabilities have changed to some extent, there are still echoes of earlier eras when such people were treated as less than fully human. One thing we can all learn from the movement in recent years is the power of coming together in a community of difference to work toward a common cause. Throughout the disability rights movement, the merging of communities has been the driving force behind major changes. As stated by the author of Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice, disability justice is about political organizing and legal change and all of that, but it's also about creating communities where we can be all of ourselves without shame and with joy. So, what can we do to organize and advocate for disability rights right here in our own community at Sunnyhill? I would suggest that there are 3 ways we can approach this work. First of all, we can educate ourselves about disability rights and spread awareness of disability issues among ourselves and in the greater community. There's a growing body of literature, films, music, and other resources that can be helpful in this endeavor. Second, we can advocate for people with disabilities by enacting laws and policies that are more just and equitable. While the ADA represented a big step forward, there's still much to be done in the area of laws and policies with regard to people with disabilities. Third, we can look at our own policies and practices here at Sunnyhill. After our construction project a few years ago, our building is much more accessible than it was before. But it is still not completely accessible. We need to make full accessibility a priority, both for our physical facility and for our online programming as well. There's more that we could be doing right now at this congregation at this time. In addition, October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and this Wednesday, October 21st, is Disability Mentoring Day, a large-scale national effort coordinated by the American Association of People with Disabilities, or AAPD, to promote career development for students and job seekers with disabilities through career exploration and ongoing mentoring relationships. You can find more information about this mentoring day and how to get involved on the organization's website, which is aapd.com. If you are a business person looking to develop a more inclusive workforce, you might want to check out Pittsburgh's Bender Consulting Services, which specializes in aligning public and private sector employers with talented employees with disabilities in support of their overall disability recruitment initiatives. You can also visit disabilityin.org to find more resources for companies committed to achieving full inclusion and equality in the workplace. And remember when you're interacting with people with disabilities that, like everyone else, they want dignity, not pity. If you find yourself feeling uncomfortable in a situation in which you don't know how to communicate with a person with a disability, or you don't know how to be helpful to them, ask the person how best to communicate or how best to be helpful. Listen to the answer and respect the answer that is given. I hope and pray that we will undertake all of this work together with an emphasis on community, justice, and equity so that full inclusion and equal rights and opportunities for people with disabilities becomes an actual lived reality here at Sunnyhill, in the larger community, across our nation, and around our world. May it be so. Amen. Our closing hymn, Lead On, was written with quotes from Justin Dart, the so-called father of the ADA, and put together by his daughter, I Dare Dart, and set to the tune of Amen by Jester Hairston. After the service, please join our coffee and conversation time via Zoom, when you can meet and talk with a number of our newest members. Thank you.
Lead on, lead on, lead on, lead on, lead on. Live the dream, fight for freedom. The world is watching. Lead on, lead on. Now's the time. We can win. We have the power. Lead on, lead on. Love for all. Have the vision. Save democracy. Lead on. We are able. Truth in action. With liberty and justice for all. Lead on, lead on, lead on.
We'll now give and receive our morning offering. We do not have a designated beneficiary for today's offering, so any non-pledge income will be put toward our general operating budget. But we will continue to have special offerings in the weeks to come as we identify and try to meet the pressing needs of our larger community. If you'd like to make a donation via our online giving system, you can do so in one of two ways. You can go to sunnyhill.org and click on the button that says Online Giving, and then follow the instructions. Once you get to the drop-down menu, please choose either 2020 Pledge if you're paying toward your pledge, or choose Non-Pledge Collections if you're not making a pledge payment. Or you can give by text at 412-324-3130. Just dial that number in using your smartphone and follow the instructions. You can also pay by check if you prefer. You can find our mailing address on our website at sunnyhill.org. Again, thank you for your generosity.
Please join us in saying the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words were written by Cheryl Block. As we go forward into this frightening, exhilarating, confusing, miraculous world, may we offer our comfort to the afflicted, our love to those who are lonely, and our wish for all to be safe. Go in peace.